Hey folks, in this episode I'm going to show you how to make these procedural paving slabs. It can easily be adapted to turn into tiles, so without further ado, let's get to it. So in this scene we basically got a plane, so go Shift A, add mesh and choose plane. I've also got two sun lamps. One is pointing down at 70 degrees and minus 140 degrees on the z-axis, and the other one is zeroed out, and the data for that. So this light is a strength of 1 with an angle of 120 degrees, and that's to simulate the skylight, blue reflecting from the sky. And the other one is a sun lamp, which is a directional lamp with an angle of 0.5, and both together you should get kind of a realistic-ish result. You can use an HDRI if you prefer, but these are the two lamps I'm going for ease of use. I am making this in cycles. Use EV if you like, it works in both. So I'm going to enable an add-on. So go to Edit, Preferences, you go to Add-ons and you type in Node for Node Wrangler, and then enable the Node Wrangler. Click this button here and save preferences, and that means every time you load Blender, the Node Wrangler will be enabled. I'm also going to be working in this layout view just to maximize the work area, and I'll drag this up. I've got my timeline open. If you haven't got your timeline open, by the way, you just hover your cursor in the bottom left until you see a crosshair, then drag it up. And I'm going to change this to shader editor. I'll then hit N to get rid of this option box here. I'll just drag this up. I'm going to select this plane. I've already got a default material attached to it. We'll work from there. Let's just drag this up. I'll drag this across. So the first texture I'm going to add will be a brick texture. So Shift A, and we'll go to texture and brick texture. I'll then plug the color straight into the principal BSDF. And this is what we've got. Let's just darken this up a bit, maybe darken this one down slightly, and I'm going to change the black, the mortar colour, to kind of a yellowish colour. Simulate sand or cement. So the offset I'm going to set to 0. The brick width and brick height I'm going to turn to 1. So now they're squares. And the mortar size I might go for 0.025. Just drag this across over to there. I'm going to hit Shift A, add input, and we'll go for texture coordinates. We're going to be using the object coordinates for this one. Now I'm going to be adding a series of math nodes here. So I'm going to hit Shift A, add converter, and we'll choose math. I'll then hit Shift D, we'll duplicate this across, Shift D, duplicate it across again, Shift D, I'll put this one up to here, and the first one we're going to set to divide. The second one I'm going to set to floor. The third one I'm going to set to multiply, and the fourth one I'm going to set to divide. I'm also going to add a value node. So Shift A, add input, and we'll choose value. I'll set the value to 2. I'll then drag this into the top socket of this divide node, and this bottom value I'm going to set to 2. I'll then drag this math node into this one, and this one into the top socket of this one here. For this value I'm going to set to 1, and then I'll drag this socket into the bottom socket of this math node. We'll keep the value at 0.5 for now. You might need to change this in a bit. I'm now going to add a vector math, so that's Shift A, converter, and we'll go for vector math. We'll keep this set to add. So this divide will go into the bottom socket, and then we'll take the object coordinates and we'll plug that into the top socket here. Okay, with these nodes, I'm going to box select these. I'm going to hit G. We're just going to drag them across to around about there. So now I'm going to add a Voronoi texture. Shift A, add texture, and we'll go for Voronoi. And the idea of using this Voronoi texture, it will give the illusion that each tile is displaced slightly different. So it will give a random displacement for each tile, or paving slab in our case. So with this vector math, we're going to plug this into the vector of the Voronoi texture, and then I'll add a map range. So Shift A, converter, map range. I'll then change the Voronoi from F1 to distance to edge. I'll then plug the distance into the value of the map range. Then add Shift A, vector, bump, and then I'll plug the result from the map range into the height of the bump node. I'll plug the normal from the bump into the normal of the principal BSDF. As you can see, we've got bump here. It's not occurring as we want it, so we'll fix that now. With this multiply node, I'm going to plug this into the scale of the Voronoi texture, and I'm also going to plug it into the scale of the brick texture. We just need a couple more nodes to complete this loop, so I'm going to hit Shift A, and we'll go for input, and we'll choose value, and I'll just duplicate one of these math nodes, the divide one, and we'll keep it as divide. I'll set the value to 1. I'll then plug that value into the top socket, and the bottom socket I'll type in 100. Box select these, we'll drag these across here. I'll then plug this value into randomize, and then I'll also drag it into the map range from max. the mortar is going around the outside, we kind of want the mortar to be in between every tile, so that's an easy fix. We just drag this object coordinate into the vector of the brick texture, and that should sort that out. Okay, so as you can see, the Voronoi is creating slightly different patterns on each tile. Let's just turn these tiles down a bit so you can see more what the Voronoi is doing. We'll have exactly the same colour, so I'm just hitting Control C and then Control V, and the Voronoi texture is making these randomised patterns. So now we're going to want to reduce that effect on the map range node. We'll go to 2 max and reduce it to 0.25. okay, maybe I'll take the roughness down to 0.25 just so we've got a bit of specular so I can kind of see what's going on here, and I'll turn the bump down to 0.5 on the strength and 0.25 on the distance. So they're all slightly randomized now. You can see by increasing this value here on this node, it's creating random indentations to give the illusion that each tile is slightly offset. For architectural visualization, we want to keep this to a minimum. You don't really want messy paving slabs. We want to keep it as uniform as possible, but with just a hint of imperfections. That helps sell the scene as realistic. Before we move on to adding a bit of grime onto these, let's just neaten these nodes. So I'm just going to drag all these across till it's nice and tight. So I'm going to hold down the shift button and then hold down my right mouse button, and I'm going to strike through, and it's going to add these points on the noodles. Then I'm going to hit G, we'll just drag them across, and I'll do that again, and I'll drag this across just so we can see what we're doing. It's good for readability. Maybe I'll drag this down slightly. So I'm just going to get on and do that, and I'll be right back. Okay, let's add a bit of colour variation to this now. That should be easy enough. So we're going to have independent colours in here, but we don't want them too far apart. You want paving slabs to kind of match each other, but in real life they'll have slight colour variations. In order to do that, I'm going to hit Shift A, add, and we'll go for texture, and we'll go for noise texture. We're going to be using the object coordinates. I'll plug that into there, right strike through to add a noodle, just so we can see where it's going and what we're doing. I'll then hit Shift A, converter, and we'll go for color ramp, and Shift A, color, and we'll go for mix color. I'll then turn this to a dark grey, something around there maybe. Hit Shift C, Shift V, I'll paste it in, and we'll make this one slightly lighter, around about there. I'll then plug the factor from the noise texture into the color ramp, and the color ramp into the factor of the mix node, and then I'll plug this result into both sockets for the minute. And as you can see, this is our texture. Let's just crunch in these values here. So we'll select the black flag, and I'll hit 0.25. I'll select the white flag, and I'll hit 0.75 just to increase the contrast. Maybe I'll take it up to 100, so it's really fine grain. We're also going to add this as bump as well. So although that's added color variation in the actual color of the material itself, we want to add color variation for each tile. That's easy. So I'm going to hit Shift A, color, and we'll go for RGB curves. We're going to pop this in the color number 2 socket. So I'm just going to drag this up until the noodle turns white, and I'll release. Now what I'll do, I'll just drag this down slightly, not too much, just so we got slight color variation of each paving slab. We want this to affect the bump as well. So what I'll do, so I'm going to select this bump node here. I'm going to hit Shift D to create a duplicate, and I'm just going to pop it into there, and then I'm going to take the factor from this noise texture, and I'm going to drag it into the height of the bump node. So now it's affecting the bump. Maybe we'll take the strength down to 0.25, 0.25. That might be a bit strong, so I'm going to set the strength to 0.1 and 0.1. That's kind of 2 layers of color variation, because we've got socket 1 and socket 2, plus we've got the noise texture, which is affecting the dark and white micro details. So we'll work on bigger details now. So we're going to add another noise texture. So with the noise texture selected, I'm going to hit Control Shift D, and that will create a duplicate, but it will also keep it attached to this noodle point here. We'll add another color ramp. I'll select this color ramp, and I'll hit Shift D, and I'll drag this up to here. I'm then going to add a color mix node. So Shift A, color, and we'll go for mix color again. I'll pop that in between the brick texture and the principal BSDF. We'll just drag this up to around about there. I'm also going to plug the color into socket B, and again we're going to add Shift A, color, RGB curves, and we'll pop this into socket B. And then socket B, we're going to turn slightly darker, and then we'll plug the factor from this noise texture into this color ramp, and then the color from the color ramp will be the factor of this mix color. We're going to change the scale. This one maybe 1.5. Maybe we'll reduce it a bit more, so maybe 1. I'll give it a detail of 8, and maybe I'll set the roughness to 0.75. and as you can see, that adds another layer of detail. I want this to affect the roughness as well. So if I was to take this noodle from the top colour ramp here, and we'll plug it into the roughness of the Principle B SDF. Obviously black is 100% shiny, and there's no paving slabs in the world that are 100% reflective, not unless it's like polished marble or something like that. To combat that, I'm going to copy this mix node, Shift D, I'll pop it into here, maybe I'll drag it up to here. Instead of it plugging into socket A, I'm going to plug it into the factor, and the top socket, maybe we'll give it a value of 0.692, and the bottom socket will give it a value of 0.97. I'm then going to add this noise into the bump as well, so I'm going to duplicate this bump node, Shift D, we'll pop it in here, and now I'm going to take the factor from this top noise texture, and I'll drag it into the height of the bump node. I'll keep it set to a strength of 0.1 and a distance of 0.1. Let's just see what we've got in cycles. Okay, it's coming together. Maybe we can change the reflection slightly. So obviously if I take this to dark, it's going to be ultra reflective. So I'm just going to change the roughness slightly. Maybe it's a bit too shiny, so I'll take it up a bit more, so around about there. Okay, now this bump, I'm going to turn it up for an example. Probably a bit strong at the moment, so I'm going to soften this up with another colour ramp. So I'm going to hit Shift A, converter, colour ramp, and I'm going to pop this into the height. So I'll grab this, I'll plug this into the colour ramp, and then this will go into the height. It's a bit unreadable at the moment, so I'm going to add a couple of control points just so we can see what we're doing. Right, so now with this colour ramp, I'm going to change it to B-spline, and it will smooth off a transition slightly because we don't want it all to be completely rough. So if I bring it all the way up, you can see the effect that it's having. In fact, I'll just turn it to linear just to show you. So if I drag this across, you can see these bumps are coming into play a bit more. Just want to take this down, but I want it to fade in really gently, which is why I choose B-spline. Okay, so with that set, I'm going to set the strength to 0.1. Just so it's a tiny hint, and if I zoom in here, we can kind of see what's going on. Let's change the colour of the grout, so maybe I'll set this to a lot darker colour, around about there, a bit less saturation, and that's our paving slabs right there. If you want to change the scale of these, you do so with this multiply node, so then we can basically change it to whatever scale we like. I'm going to keep mine set at 1. We'll save this material to paving slabs. So that's pretty much all the nodes. I'll just show you the controller points. So I go to workbench. Maybe I'll set my scene lights and my scene world. So we go down here, and to change the offset of the grout and the slabs, you basically reduce the divide node, something around there, and they become more wonky. And to increase the effect that they're displaced from the ground, you take this first bump node and you just increase distance or the strength. In fact, keep the distance as is. I'm going to set mine to 100 because I want it minimal, because I'm going to use this for the architectural visualization tutorial I'm working on. I'll just give you a clear shot of all these nodes here. It looks really complicated, but when you break it down, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. Quite an advanced node setup. It's small in comparison to a lot of stuff I've done. Take a screenshot of that. If you get stuck, you can always use this as a reference. It's always important to save your file. So go to File, Save As, and we'll save it as Subscribe, you legends. It's up to you to choose your render settings. Obviously this isn't a final piece or anything like that. I'll just show you basic render settings. So I'm going to select my camera. I'm going to take it up to 1.7 meters because that's the average eye level for a person. Maybe I'll use tilt shift on the y-axis just to bring that down. I'm in cycles, light paths. I'll turn off reflective and refractive caustics. I'll turn the sampling down to 128 and a noise threshold of 0.025. And I'll just hit F12. Another thing you can do, just while I'm here, your mortar size, you can actually completely get rid of it, and you'll still be left with these paving slabs which look slightly offset. I'm going to bring mine back into play, but I'm going to have it a lot smaller, so 0.005, just to fill in the gaps, maybe a bit bigger, 0.01. Okay, I'll be happy with that. And then F12, and that will render out your paving slabs. So that's the tutorial in a nutshell. I hope you found this useful. Have a great day, level up, and thanks for watching.